How's everyone doing?
How are you?
Yeah. Uh, just I guess, a quick recap from yesterday. Really introduced a lot of just different things, but yet we went back and took another look at the memory aspect. Ron brought up a couple of great questions, and Barbara had some great insight. And so we basically went back and applied some of the things we had discussed previously about memory and how important that is for the aspect of us finding our identity. We also sort of looked at the incorporation of Melchizedek and what it meant that he had no genealogy and no just no trace of where he came from really, and Barbara really connected the dots on that, and we talked about the righteousness, and we talked about how his ultimate representation of God and the earth, and the epitome of that, so to say. And then we really just did a recap on how important memory is to us, and how much we use it more than we know, and how others can actually, we talked about measuring their growth, but also how it truly uncovers our identity and helps us to be molded in that identity and understand how to use it and operate. So, any questions or comments from this past weekend? Okay. Well, one thing I definitely want to just start out with, and actually we talked about it a little bit yesterday, just how much of our past ritualistic methods and just religion in general, how it's sort of like took away from our ability to utilize that memory, especially in certain spaces and certain times. And I really thought that Ron brought up the example of the well digging and what it meant to dig a well, and I just really look at this whole lesson really as everything that we've been going over for the last several years. I see some aspect of all those things in this lesson because everything's kind of being integrated. And it's being integrated for us to really balance out a lot of different feelings and thoughts we've had over the years, and how we've really like transformed ourselves to understanding who we are, and spiritually we've sort of gained control over our emotions, and how we should be what we're going to be in that given moment in time. And it's funny how I looked at, I didn't watch TV last night, but when I got up this morning, everyone was just talking about, Chris Rock being slapped, and I went online and looked at it, and one of the things that I thought of in that moment was like a perfect example of Will not understanding who he was at that moment in time, how he sort of denied that, and let emotions get the best of him. And I thought about how we just go about everyday life, and how things can possibly set us off or ruin our day, or we're at work. And I know Evelyn, she made a couple of comments too about how she saw an adjustment at work, how you could see things happen now in real life, for us because of these lessons. But it's so easy to get emotional, and because in one aspect you think you're defending someone's honor, and you're doing the right thing, and so many of us have done what we thought was right and made the right decision at the time based on external factors, things that were pressuring us. We made what we thought was the right decision, but we didn't make the righteous decision. And one thing that we had discussed about is that his name meant the King of Righteousness, and he was both priest and king at the same time, and how he ordained and blessed Abraham, and how Jesus was, sort of ordained in the order of Melchizedek, and it's because of that righteousness that we're talking about. And then, I know yesterday the discussions came up about, and I felt like we had, from a religious standpoint, and faith sort of like forces us to grapple with things and not necessarily utilize who we are, but we grapple with things and we say that we're going to have faith that it's going to be what it is going to be, instead of us being who we are and being, the I am who we are. And so faith sometimes outweighed our righteousness, and we've looked at righteousness as so far away and unattainable, or we looked at it as an entity that had to be righteous, and so we had to tap into that righteousness and pray that they would do what's best for us. But now we're understanding too that we have this control over our own righteousness, and we have to really be righteousness. Like Barbara said yesterday, we're in a position now where we're going to be what we are. We're being righteousness. We're not praying and hoping that someone will display righteousness for us. And we understand that all these things are incorporated in being Elohim, and all these things are sort of a demand or a status that's placed on us by us accepting who we are. And this a sense of nothing else is really looking at the true identity and how it's embedded in us and what we have to do day in and day out to display that attribute of Elohim and be Elohim. So it just kind of, I saw that, it just kind of made me think, wow, those were two people that I liked. I mean, it's looking at it from an entertainment perspective, and you sort of hate to see it, but it's just, it shows us how fragile relationships, communication, sharing, when all those things aren't taking place, it just was on full display on how an emotional train of mind, thought process could really lead to someone just making a poor decision. And so I just thought that was really ironic that took place last night, because I had never seen anything like that I didn't watch it live, but just anything like that happened before. And so I thought that was just like an example of how things can turn really quick, even for someone in their position. But we brought up one scripture yesterday, and I wanted to kind of go back to the Hebrews 5, 11, and 12 for just a second, and try to really pull together the last couple of weeks. And Hebrews 5, 11, and 12, it says, we have too much to say, but it is hard to explain because you are slow to learn. In fact, though by this time you ought to be teacher, you need someone to teach you elementary truths of God's word all over again. You need milk and not solid food. And I know we made a reference to that so much, but it really goes back to what Ron, one of the questions he brought up about memory. And when I looked at memory from a different aspect of going back to beginning, this scripture sort of popped into my mind again. Because when we go back to the beginning, we're basically saying we're going back to finding our true identity, the essence of who we are. And this scripture sort of reflects that, because it talks about the different levels of being slow to learn, which we used an example last week, being stuck, and then where you should be versus what you are. And if you're not there, and that's okay, go back to the beginning, which means go back to the milk, start with that. And this is really putting us on the path to what is truly meant to be righteous. Because I think we say it, and I'm just saying we in general as mankind and religion and people in church and us, even us too, we say we're righteous, but do we understand that we are righteousness? And that's in that whole process of understanding, accepting who we are, and building to it. That's why it's always evolving. It's never stagnant. It can never just growth can never just end or stop. Growth is always something that's continuous. And so when we're in a state of mind, or even the past religious, things we did, it kind of stagnates us. It keeps us stuck in one place and keeps us basically at the point of not, understanding our identity. And so I definitely wanted to kind of revisit that today too. Any questions or thoughts on this so far?
Hey, yes, this is Ron. Um, this reminds me of something I was telling Pastor that last Friday I had a kind of a rough day, and it shouldn't have been a rough day. Should have been a pretty good day, but a couple of people are out who usually help me with things and bring my materials and set things up for me, and they were out, and it's unusual for both of them to be out, but it kind of threw things out of balance for me. And it got me frustrated pretty quick. And it was half the day had passed that I stopped and I thought, why do you feel this way? What's wrong? And I remembered that what I usually do every morning, I get up real early. My clock goes off at 4. And I usually get up and just kind of sit in peace and quiet and kind of meditate a little bit. And I see my day. I kind of go through, do my breathing and none of it, it's nothing plans like I do this, then I do that, just how, how I feel. But that particular day, I didn't do that. And, I thought, you let something real simple take advantage of you. And it's only because for a brief moment, you just kind of forgot who you were. You forgot the little things. And you just feel a little out of kilter right now. So I stopped and just kind of took a few minutes and kind of gathered myself, But it just goes to show that it doesn't take long. It doesn't take but a minute. It doesn't have to be anything big. Yeah, like last night, I'm sure both of those men are feeling terrible today about what happened, and I feel bad for them. But we never. There's always opportunity, rather, to go back to the beginning and listen to you explain that, because in Hebrews 5, up until recently here, when I've read that, I thought that was kind of a chastisement, but after you discuss it this way, I see that it's not. It's an opportunity to go back to the beginning and just kind of start things over. So just good observation. But thank you. I thought I'd share that. You'll mute us.
Oh man, I'm talking away. Yeah. When you go back to it, what you just described is like when you go back and you just remind yourself, you recall who you are, and that recollection, that recalling reminds you to tap into who you are. It's no different when one of the technique, it's a technique for you to meditate, or it's a technique for you to just kind of like not feel overwhelmed. Somebody who's got anxiety, they use a technique. They tell them to wear a rubber band on their wrist, and they're like, they pop that when you start feeling overwhelmed, you pop that band, you pop it, and that's just to sort of remind you to center yourself again. And no different for us to remind ourselves to just breathe. Like my trigger, I'll tell you, especially when it comes to work, something that triggers me is if I'm midway through a day, or it's like the day is almost over and I feel like I look, I say, man, I haven't been productive today at all. I haven't got a lot done, or sometimes we will just show up places in hopes to meet with people or whatever, but you'll get some days where you're like, oh man, I just this wasn't a productive day, and then you kind of press to make up for that for the rest of the day. And when I feel like that, I have to remind myself, you know what, this day is going to go how I want it to go, and how it was supposed to go. And if I didn't make an appointment today or follow up with something that I wanted to get done, it's going to work out. Maybe there was a timing issue, but I try to remind myself to kind of step back and, hey, that's, I'll get to it. And then when I reflect back over the end of the week, I've gotten more done than I realized I was ever going to get done at the beginning of the week. And I say, wow, I didn't realize I was going to be able to get all that done this week or see all these people. But it just kind of worked out, I may go someplace and where someone was supposed to be in Charleston, I go to Somerville and they just happen to be there. They're all there, and we can hash out everything there because they just happen to be there that day. And so things all kind of fall in place for you, and you just have, so that's my trigger. Is I always, when I take the time aspect out of things, because that's always the thing that gets me. Like, I want to see what I get done in a period of time, or if my time, I feel like I've wasted my time. That's always been my trigger. So I've tried now to just take the time aspect of it, be what I need to be, do what I need to do, and always, keep it. That's what we say, centering yourself, keep yourself centered. And so if that means going back to the beginning, and in this world standpoint, to keep myself, on track, I'll go back to the beginning and I'll write down a list of stuff on a sheet of paper and put it in my pocket for that week so I can check it off. But what have I got to do to bring myself back and do the simple things to get things accomplished? That's what I'll do. I'm never too big about just basically writing it down just to keep myself, we say, keep yourself organized. So that's kind of a real world example of something that gets me, and I center myself to pull myself back when I feel like I'm not being as productive. And then I just let the week play out and it all works out. And that's just always been one of my triggers when it comes to work. But then like I said, I go back to yesterday, just remember, memory helps us with our identity, because we self-analyze, we analyze ourselves, and we do one thing that we can count at a period of time. So we analyze ourselves and we do one thing, we go back over a period of time and say we've gotten better at that. We look at some other things that we may need to evolve or to continue and grow on it. And that's what that memory does. It allows us to just mentally slide up and down that timeline so that we're helping us understand who we are in the present time. Any other comments or questions on that? But ultimately, we just want to, make sure that our memory helps reinforce who we are and making the right choice, the righteous choice, not just the right choice, but making a righteous choice, choices that have been battle tested, sharpened because of our wisdom and understanding of how we should go about day in, day out. Last night, he just didn't have a self awareness, and sort of a perfect example, like you said, Ron, of how it can just all come downhill, and that lack of awareness, lack of judgment at that time, it's not going to cost them anything. I think they will both be able to mend and move on, but just in that period of time, you can see how quick things can turn. And when we look at ourselves being unstable, unbalanced, where do we go? And so that's why this whole lesson is important of, finding our identity, being that identity, never forgetting that who you are. Nothing can take that away. Nothing can strip it. The only thing we can do, we can deny it at times. And when we deny it, we see all of the results of when we deny it. But it doesn't mean that you can't still go back to the beginning and evolve and elevate yourself back to a certain point. I think Evelyn asked a question a couple of weeks ago, and basically the answer was you're able to do multiple things, multitask, and you're able to be who you need to be. You're able to be righteous and make that decision, even though you're going through something or you're going through a challenging state yourself. We still are able to display that and be it when we need to be it. And I think that was one of the other things that I was sort of surprised of. Well, not surprised, but just really not truly aware of that. You can have your own journey going on, but at the same time, you just need to be for someone else or represent yourself in that situation, because at the end of the day, that's who we are. That's what we do. No matter what, you're still going to be those things. And Ron, you mentioned about the can you sort of recap the well digging and the spiritual aspect that you brought up yesterday?
I'm trying to remember what I said yesterday. Yes. Yeah, I was talking about Isaac going behind Abraham because Abraham had dug wells. He had set up altars and he dug a well. And when Pastor brought that up, I had never seen it from that aspect before, that those wells remind you of the episode of where you were in your life when you had an encounter with Elohim, and those you get to see yourself in the mirror, and it is and not only an opportunity for reflection, but an opportunity to grow, and it also shows you that you are bigger than yourself. You're bigger than your physical self, because you see that that memorial is left there for those who pass, for all those who come that way, who are on that same journey, and that is all a part of you who you are. So when he does this and he goes back and he see that the Philistines, I think it was, had closed up the well, so he dug another one, and they claimed that one. He ended up digging 3 wells, and then the third well was the one that he ended up keeping and seeing God, and what he saw was it being, and I'm trying to find my notes, being an expanded place. In other words, it is a place of it was meant to become large or to grow wide, to make room for it to expand. So that's what we do through our reflections. That's what we do. We expand. We, as you said a while back, borrow energy from each other. We become one, and that enlightenment, that righteousness in you, becomes a righteousness in me, and becomes a righteousness in all the ancestors. And that's the expansion, and so the eighth sense is more of that. We talked about the sixth or the seventh. I think the seventh one is the transformation. You're transforming from, looking at yourself as a physical being to seeing yourself as a spiritual entity. So that's just what I saw there when Pastor talked about it, when you brought it up a couple of weeks ago. It just kind of all fell in place to me and made sense.
Yeah, and it does, I was always thinking during the course of this lesson, and we say, ourselves, it starts from within, but that digging, we're digging through a lot of stuff, and like I said, the faith aspect was one, have faith, and to continue to dig a well without knowing how deep the water is, that's a discipline.
And the religion, I mean, that's in all of us. You're digging up all of that. You come face to face with all of it.
Yeah.
And one thing, let me mention this, it also means to be barren or to be emptiness. So to be empty. So not only is it you expanding, but it's also creating space in you for something else to be added. So just wanted to throw that in as well.
No, definitely. I appreciate it because, you have to be disciplined to do that well. You have to be disciplined to know, okay, this is my identity. It's underneath all this stuff, and I've got to rip it away. And I think about how we were taught to use faith, the altar, like we're leaving things at the altar, the spiritual altar. And I don't know everybody's background, but I just know, I said a little bit of it yesterday, that going up Sunday after Sunday, we were always taught that it was an outside fix, whether it be going up for intercessory prayer, leaving it at the altar, the way we viewed communion, the way we even looked at baptism in our life. Everything was drilled into us that it was we had to pray for something to come from the outside to make us whole. And the reality is we have to search within ourselves and uncover, remove all that stuff that never should have been there to attain that awareness, so that we understand that us realizing that we're whole to who we are inside of us. But you have years and years of all of these things, interceding on my behalf. And to me now, I look at it, it just doesn't make any sense. It just, as I'm going to ask someone that I really don't know what their awareness is of themselves, intercede on my behalf. And it's basically a ceremony, and you go through this, you go through it. But now I'm like, golly, how far off was I? Because my intercession should be me meditating and going into my own spiritual altar where I cannot deceive myself. I can't tell myself something that is not true about myself because it's there. And then understanding that identity and staying disciplined to that, because it's so easy to get swayed to a different philosophy. But staying disciplined to the philosophy itself means that you are constantly digging and uncovering these things from digging through. And just when you think you're done, you get to a period where you may be stuck or sidetracked, but you have to still be disciplined and keep digging through. And that's one of the things that this A-Sense is really pulling together, is the mental discipline, the spiritual discipline that it takes to balance out these natures. And going forward, we really have to depend on our identity and what abilities we have to move forward versus, going back and asking intercessory prayer or we're going to turn it over to whatever. And we understand the universe has a plan, but the energy that we give off and we deal with and how we approach it is totally different than always been put on us and required of us. And like now I just look at it, it just doesn't make any sense what I was doing or what I was doing then.
But it was part of your journey.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
Can we go back to the slap thing that happened with Chris and Will? I remember Kathy was saying that we could either miss an opportunity or take we could either miss the opportunity or something about we can learn from what happened or whatever. Does that make sense what I'm saying? But anyway, that had to have happened for a reason. 2 black males. It's never happened before in this lifetime that people or has been recorded. So do you guys not think that's something? I think Will slapped him back to the 8 cents because he slapped him real hard. But to me, something spiritual behind that. It was 2 black males, and it has never done before or has never been recorded. That's my question.
Yeah, when I saw that this morning, the first thing I thought of is that he denied who he was at that moment in time. Like there was an unawareness there. There was even the emotional intelligence was gone. There was a lack of self-discipline, self-awareness. And we talked about the outside factors, how those things can get us emotionally, how they can get us socially. And there was a sort of a disconnect between the two of them because you would think in that industry and that those weren't just 2 B-list guys. You had an A-list comedian, you had an A-list actor, and he won an Oscar, I guess, later on that night. So you had 2 people there on display. One for sure clearly lacked the self-awareness of who he is, because I've heard him talk, introspectively, like he's, a really interesting guy when you start thinking about what it takes to be at that level. And so from that part of it, I saw it all kind of play out, some of the things that we were discussing, and basically I saw what happens when you deny it, and to me that was a reflection of that. Does anybody else have a take on that?
Yeah, I guess I do as well. I've listened to some affirmation videos that Will Smith has done. I mean, I thought he was again, as you said, I think it just stepped out of character briefly there, and it took advantage of him. And like I said, I would be willing to bet that he feels terrible today. Uh, but at the same time, on the other side, uh, I think what Chris Rock did was totally disrespectful, and you know, it wasn't so much that someone decides to shave their head or cut their hair short. That's one thing if it's a fashion thing, but because someone is going through an illness, you don't play with that. You don't do that. And I think his status was nothing's off limits. Nothing I can say and do what I want. He has earned that. He's grown to that. But maybe this was a reality check for him. Uh, it's funny that this happened because he disrespected a black woman. So
Yeah.
I kind of saw both sides of it. I see exactly what, and I agree with that's what he's saying about Will Smith, but I also think Chris Rock dropped the ball too. He has become accepted in his status is because he's on the academies a lot. If he's not hosting, he's as one of the presenters or something. So they really like him, and I think he kind of elevated himself a little higher than he probably should have, and this was the result of it. But yeah, I agree with you, Evelyn. I think it means something.
Well, I think I had my phone on mute, but I was saying that he disrespected a black woman, and it took Will to slap him in the face to say, "You don't say that about my wife." So he got popped.
Yeah, Will, and I agree with you. The irony of it, can't be missed. This was because he disrespected a black woman.
Can I ask a question when you guys finish the discussion? This is Kathy.
Go ahead, Kathy. We're just trying to hash it out.
Yeah, I'm listening to this conversation too, and I, like you, I'm trying to hash it out too, because I didn't know anything about it until later this morning. I didn't watch the awards last night. Right. And the first question that went into my mind is, if it had been what's the guy, Ray Romano, Everybody Loves Raymond, because first of all, it's entertainment. It's a comedian. And if he had said the same thing, would Will have laughed it off? And that made me wonder if there was something deeper than two black men having beef where you're going to say something and come up and slap me, because I have been to comedy shows, and every comedian, part of their routine is just to pick somebody in the audience and say something. And if you look at the whole clip, Will was laughing until Jada turned and looked at him like, "Oh, you think that's funny that he's calling me out?" And then he became offended on behalf of his wife and came up to do something. And I guess what I'm looking at is, where did when any comedian that now stands on the stage and does that as part of their routine, just calling themselves being funny, because alopecia is not an illness. It is a disorder that some women have. And of course, a lot of black women have it. I know quite a few with it. And I guess when I first looked at it, I was like, oh, wow, that was part of the comedy routine, I thought. And so maybe I missed the whole thing. I know it's bigger than, and I hear what Evelyn is saying, because I have taught that there was a missed opportunity to be your higher self. In that instance, being slapped, I saw Chris taking the higher road, saying, you know what? I could, even though I said something that I didn't think he was going to take the wrong way, because it depends on how you frame it. Because I saw the movie G.I. Jane, and I thought she was really a beautiful woman with shaved hair. And it always depends on how you frame what someone says to you. That's what makes us Elohim. If I take that, and I take that as the high road that you said, I'm a beautiful black woman sitting here with a shaved head. Why was it the response to see that in the negative right off the bat? And oh, she's got alopecia, and oh, she couldn't help that. And no, of course she couldn't help that. And she chose to shave her head. Many women just put on a wig. Many women shave. I guess my question is, I'm trying to understand, because I see it as a missed opportunity for both of them to be their higher selves. But in that scenario, I see Chris, when he realized he didn't see that as a joke, that it was intended to be. And I've often taught you, and you all have heard me say this many, many times, a joke is only a joke when everyone laughs. And he could have gone up later and said, hey, dude, don't make any comments about my wife's head or something. And I heard what you said. He reacted as. And I guess my question becomes, they both missed an opportunity to be their higher selves. But my first thought was, if it had been any other comedian on that stage, because was there a beef already there between those two men? If it had been any other comedian on that stage, would he have reacted? Because his first response was he knew it was a joke because he laughed. He knew it wasn't to be disrespectful to this man's wife. But now that's what it's going to play out as, and that's what it will be forever and ever. Amen. But that's what comedians do. I'm sure that the three women that were hosting said all kind of shade and made all kind of jokes throughout, but no one came up and slapped them. So I've been trying to put the whole thing into context and understand it too. And I'm listening to the discussion, and I guess I see it a little differently. And I just wanted to throw that out and see if anybody thought to look at it from that perspective.
The only thing different that I thought, I wondered if there had been a prior discussion with Will and Jada. That's what I thought. I didn't know if I never thought about it being a beef between the two men. I wondered if the husband and wife had a discussion about this before, prior to the show, because it was a reaction. It was a reaction between the two of them before he gets up and goes on stage. So
yeah, and my only thing was I didn't know, but now we'll never get to the bottom of it, because the media is saying that they had a problem in the past. And if that is the case, then I say Chris would have known maybe I shouldn't joke with this dude because we've had a problem, unless he thought the problem was settled. And if I had been mad at you 2 years ago and we worked it out, I wouldn't expect something that I say today for you to still think about what I said to you 2 years ago. And so I don't know if there was a beef between them or not, but I'm still looking at this thing in a lot of different ways. And I agree. Why did that play out on what I'm going to call the world stage? Because it was televised in so many places. Two black men, a black woman at the core, at the root of everything that played out. And I'm just trying to figure out how to frame that too, because I'm not certain I know the whole gist of everything that went on, but I definitely want to understand it from the spiritual aspects. I know what I saw physically, but what is the deeper underlying meaning of it all? And I think that's the same thing Evelyn is asking, and I think that's what we're all talking about. What's the bigger picture? Because I'm not quick to point the finger at one or the other, because I really in my heart believe, had it been any other comedian or even a white comedian that said that same thing, the response would have been different. Now, I could be wrong, but that was my first thought, was you laugh first, then she's offended, then you get offended, and you defend her honor as a husband should do for his wife. And he went up to do that, but I don't think that was the way to defend her honor. I don't agree with that at all. But I just wanted to throw that point of view in.
Well, Kathy, this is Mary. They have that round table discussion and all kind of stuff they talk about in their personal life. So I'm with you.
I know.
There is an underlying thing that we don't know, because, that stuff that they bring out, who's going to tell people about your personal, your intimate stuff? And for this to offend you, something not right. So you're probably right. There is something going on, and I didn't know what y'all was talking about, so I apologize. I had to Google that. I was too embarrassed to ask. I'm sorry. So I Googled it, and I think Chris handled it appropriately because that's what they do. They make fun of people, and I don't care too much for comedians anyway, but that's how it is. And there is something that is underlined, and who knows what, and like you said, we may never know. But again, Chris took the high road. He is a comedian. He makes fun of everybody. So what it was, he just pushed the wrong button that night. And there could have been some problems between the husband and wife before they got there. There are all kind of factors that we just don't know. We just looking at it and making assumptions. But there is something going on, and we'll never know. But it's always more to the story than what we see. That's all I want to say. Thanks.
Well,
Thank you.
one of the
I agree,
things,
absolutely.
one of the things that I don't think we're overlooking, but yet Ms. Cassie alluded to it. Everything has an origin, and this goes all the way back to 2016 of a joke that Chris Rock said about Jada Pinkett. If you go back 2000, so everything has an origin. No one goes from 0 to 100 without an origin, and everything has an origin.
What happened in 2016, George? I mean, what happened
He did the same thing. He said a joke on, and it was a funny joke. Now, to me, it was funny. And it just goes back to 2000. And in this technology, you can Google it. And Chris Rock said something about Jada Smith in 2016. I can't recall a joke. I just found it funny. So when someone says, keep my name out your mouth, or keep my mama name out your mouth, or keep my sister name, that means you done said something before. And the first time it was said, maybe it wasn't addressed. And the second time it was said, maybe it wasn't addressed. So when someone says, keep my name out your mouth, or keep my spouse name out of your mouth, that already tells you something happened prior to that. And it could have been a day ago, or it could have been 6 years ago. So there's history here that we don't know. And now, nor will we ever know. It's like Jimmy the Greek. Ron, you remember Jimmy the Greek, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You hire an alcoholic, a functional alcoholic, and a gambler. And when he gets into his routine of what he said about slavery, which was the truth, the athletic black man with the athletic black woman, people got mad at Jimmy Greek for saying that. You knew when you hired him, he was a functional alcoholic and he was a gambler. So when you put a person like Chris Rock on the stage, he's a comedian. Yet at the Oscars, this is not like you at the Funny Bone, or this is not like you at the Laughing Gas. This is a whole new, so it's ownership on both sides. It's just ownership on both sides. Yet when you hire a comedian like Chris Rock, and Chris Rock, he paid his dues. He would come down to the township in Columbia. He shouldn't have said what he said. He just shouldn't have said. And Will has been up under some stress. Well, he done been the butt of jokes from around about, ever since that round table talk, but he done been the butt of jokes. He can't go nowhere. Hey, that Will Smith. Man, you know what it is. So, and all I'm saying is I agree with Miss Cassie. There is a history to this. And it goes back to 2016. And when Will Smith said, keep my wife's name out of your mouth, Will did laugh. However, we don't know if that laugh was, I'm embarrassed, let me play it off. We don't know that part. Sometimes you have to laugh. If you've ever walked before and you trip, especially with brothers, we act like it was part of we playing that. So that laugh may have been a laugh to cover up, like, why he going here? He know my old lady and I going through some stuff, and he might have just lost it. So that's all I had. So that may be it from the spiritual aspect. Everything has an origin. We'll know what his origin is. Chris Rock may not know what the origin is. Yet they're gonna have to hash it on out. And this kind of move is not like it set black folks back. That it is what it is. That's all I had to say.
Well,
Hey, this is Barbara.
okay.
Just going to weigh in a little bit too. It was a missed opportunity for people of color who were very visible in the physical realm, very visible, very successful. But it was an opportunity to show a different approach by all of them. And even with Jada, with the look she gave Will, whatever's going on, regardless of all that, it was a missed opportunity for all of them to take the higher road. So it just reflects on us and tells us that we still have lots of work to do, and we can't let our vanity, we can't let our money, we can't let our power that we've achieved because of our physical achievements, we can't let that be what causes us to react. And it just says that everybody has that potential point where they will react. But even so, there's a choice to make of either reacting out of the ego or responding out of your higher self. So we all still have work to do, and that just, it was just displayed in for all the world to see. But that just tells me we have work to do.
No, I agree. I mean, really, with everybody that weighed in, you're looking at all the different perspectives, and everyone's right, really, in the sense that the opportunity was missed. They really forgot who they both were, what they represented. And like I said, you're talking about people at the height of their profession. And I think from a spiritual connection point, Evelyn's first question, I also see it as there was no connection there. There was no awareness of the identity. In that moment of that slap, you just saw someone who responded emotionally to someone who owns some space in his head. And that is, a great example really for us too, to see that, there is a long way to go from the standpoint of that mankind still has triggers. We still have things that make us unbalanced emotionally and elicit the wrong response, and we end up, making a mistake when we're going back to the beginning, what we talked about this lesson. We make mistakes when we allow so many things outside to influence us. Instead of really centering yourself in that moment, you allowed a different philosophy in your life to take hold, and you basically make a mistake that you have to go back to the beginning for, because the appropriate response may have been to to communicate, connect with him later, and say, hey, listen, that really offended us. I know you're just making jokes, but share. We talked about sharing last week. Share and communicate and build that connection. But I do think, like everyone said, there's a little more to it, and things tend to build up and build up. And that was, could he have just cussed from his chair? And that will still be a improper response, but he got up and walked up, slapped, and went back. And so and sometimes whether it's emotion of embarrassment, pain of someone else we saw, we taught about tapping into someone's power, but also we do tap into people's mess that we get entangled with, or things get out of hand because we allow ourselves to be drawn into something. So it all kind of goes back to the identity, and really, if he understood who he was at that point in time, he wouldn't have allowed himself to be drawn into something like that. And from Chris's perspective, if he was aware of who he was at that time and the connection was there, would he have been a little more sensitive to his words and how someone may have felt about it, who's trying to obviously cope with something that's bothering him a little bit? Like Barbara said, no matter how much money you have, these emotional things can happen, and so I do see that spiritually, that there was a missed opportunity. There was a lack of connection. There was a lack of empathy. There was also a lack of awareness in denying that identity. We sort of got to see it play out on stage, what happens when you really deny your identity in certain situations. And we get opportunities every day to make a choice and a change. And unfortunately for them, it was just on full display that they got lost and stuck at a point in time that was a bad look.
Hey, I have a question I like to ask, because I know that was played out where everybody can see, but a lot of times when I make a mistake, I just toss and turn, even though I ask for forgiveness and okay, that's in the past. I got to live in the present, go back to who I am. It still is a task. I mean, it is a chore. It is can't think of the right words of how difficult it is to get it out of your system, for me to let go and move on. Even though I know, okay, it's over with, you made a mistake, and if I have to apologize, apologize. But then there are times that I just can't let something go. What is the best way of dealing with something like that? Because it stays in your mind, and you knock it out, and you say, okay, that's in the past, move on. This is today. This is another day. You make mistakes. Go back to the beginning. You are human. You are Elohim. You are God. You are love. But the mistakes come anyway. So just how do you get past it? That's all. I'm sorry I kept going on, but just want you to understand where I'm coming from, so that maybe you can help me answer that. Thanks.
No, thank you. Yeah, because we talked a couple of weeks ago about how do you get beyond things, like when you're stuck. We used the example of, because I think it's one of the biggest and the easiest ones for us to get hung up on. We talked about forgiveness as one of the examples. Like, how do you at some point move beyond something in the forgiveness aspect of it, because it's so easy to say it, oh, I'm going to forgive you, but the feeling, the emotions come back, or you see something that brings us, to a point of remembering that issue that you just can't get over. And that was one of the things we talked about a couple of weeks ago, and even, it's a good question. We have to, we say go to yourself, your beginning, and then sometimes you may need a nudge from someone else who's connected and understands the aspect of forgiveness. But it starts with yourself, allowing yourself to like not have that, ownership in you, whatever the issue is. We talk about, meditating on a solution for it, but more importantly, if we look at it from everything we can talk about right now, you have to communicate it. You also have to acknowledge it, that, this is an issue. Until you acknowledge that that's what's the blockage, then it's no different than us, like, denying who we are. So if you're not acknowledging it, that it is an issue, part of that is the denying of it. And then the second thing, we always have to, go back to smaller battles that you had before, something that may not have been something that was keeping you stuck before, but how did you overcome something else that you struggled with? The answers always are from within with us. It's just a matter of removing that trigger, not denying it, understanding it, and then there it becomes a daily situation where you evolve. And like for instance, being able to forgive someone, I have to look at, okay, what's causing me not to forgive them? Like, what's the one issue? Was it something that just made me feel bad, a pride situation, whatever it was? What's the one thing that's holding me back? Why can't I advance? And so I think, not to give a long-winded answer, but part of it is first acknowledging exactly what it is that's got you unbalanced to that point of not really wanting to let it go. And then once you truly go back and acknowledge that, look at the aspects of yourself that tell you who you are and the strength and whatever it's going to take for you to move beyond. Where are you going to find that? And then also utilize your mirrors. And I didn't want to go like all the way back to the lesson, but it's so much. It's so easy for us to say it and not do it. And that's why we're looking at this whole 8 cents about how to integrate everything, because it's easier said than done. And you're always evolving, and it may take you a month, it may take you a year to move beyond something. And does anyone have a different perspective on it too? Because I was trying to tie in the forgiveness aspect without actually going into too much detail of what.
And see, I see that, and I heard the conversation about being stuck.
Okay.
But somehow or another, I didn't relate that to me. And I heard it. I was online. I heard it. So I guess it's more of internalizing what I hear and actually see it. But yeah, I want to hear some more about it, because I did hear the discussion, and it's like, okay, I guess that ain't me or whatever. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Somebody.
Hey, this is Barbara. It's a perfect example of being stuck. And when you're stuck, it's like whatever the situation is holding you hostage, because you are remembering and you are reacting to that continuously when you can't forgive it and let it go. So it's like it's holding you hostage. You're stuck with it. And the question is, how do we not allow stuff like that to hold us hostage? Even though we're stuck, how do we allow it unstick us? Because what stuck does is stuck keeps us right here, right now, even though a situation happened 10 years ago. If we're still stuck with that same situation, you can see how it limits our growth, our maturity, our advancement, our spiritual growth, and so it's just going to be a decision, and then reminding yourself a decision. I'm not going to stay here stuck like this. I'm letting this go. I forgive. And then reminding yourself every time it comes up, not going there. I already handled that. I have already forgiven. I am not going to allow that to take root in my thought again. Because when we're stuck, what's stuck continues to be rooted in our thoughts. And when it's rooted in our thoughts, it affects our speech and our actions. So that's just another way to look at it as well.
Okay, thank you. That was good. Y'all, thank y'all for answering that. I got a better understanding now. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. And that's, like I said, it's always easier said than done. And that's when, even when we say, understand our identity, but like Barbara said, there's certain things that move you from being stuck or just even like, it's almost like I have, I have a bill to pay, and this is saying, I have a bill, and this is $1,000, and I need to pay that bill by a certain period of time. But when I add up everything else I do day in and day out, I'm not going to be able to pay that $1,000 by May. Just say we'll just use May as an arbitrary. I've got to pay this bill. It's an additional $1,000 by May, and now look at everything I have. It's going to take me till July to really pay that $1,000 back. But I want to do it. I want to be disciplined. I want to be honored to doing that $1,000. And but this is impossible for me. So what do I do? And ideally, you could say, well, I'm gonna just go get a loan, but then you got to pay that back. And so sometimes, like for a solution like that, and I'm just using this as an example, I need to pay $1,000 by May, but it's going to be July before I realistically can pay that and manage. My inner self now would be, instead of maybe 10 years ago, I'm like, I'm just going to avoid it. I'm going to work it out whenever I can and just get it and just be late, whatever. But now the inner self would tell me the ideal thing would be to do wherever that $1,000 has to go, let me communicate with them my situation. We talk about sharing. I'm going to share with them honestly and openly. This is where I am. This is realistically, this is the expectations. And I want to give you the $1,000 back. It's going to be June. Can you deal with that? And so versus a scenario where you just don't pay it until you have it in June, where there's no communication, there was no connection. So let's use that monetary part of it to say sometimes we have to communicate our way through things too. We have to share our way through things. It removes some of the things that may prevent us from wanting to share and communicate with, and just that shared aspect of it. They could say, well, hey, you know what? If you can get it here in July, no problem. It may be $1,050 by then, but this, we'll work with you on it. And so sometimes that answer is intuitive, and know that I can go to someone and communicate what's going on and tell them I'm working on a solution, but it may take me, a little longer to get there. And so I just say that to say sometimes you have to share, communicate, and tap your way out of being stuck as well. With someone, we talked about, someone who is connected and has your best interest at heart, where you feel, that I've got a bond, a relationship with this person. I'm going to talk through it with them. And so sometimes that also allows you a perspective to kind of recall who you are and clear things out, removing some of the cloudy thoughts out, and it helps you to kind of align your thoughts, and the solution begins to lay itself out. And then from the future standpoint, when we do overcome things like that, we move on beyond those things. It's easier the second time around to see your elevation because now you see the growth that you can measure because you were in that predicament once and you knew that communicating and being upfront was the best way to move beyond that. So that situation arises again, you're not going to be stuck, if that makes sense. But it's all, it's all about going back to, we talk about the milk, and sometimes we got to take a step back and really just unpack things and move one step at a time. I know we.
Thanks.
Oh, no, I know we've all had. I mean, I've had issues with people around you, whether it be death in the family, health, helping people deal with things, finances, whatever it is. We've all kind of like been, because life keeps coming at us. I know I used that a couple of times, and it's never going to stop coming at us. But the way we process and handle our decision making, it allows it to be a smoother ride. And so we learn from the things in the past, and we keep elevating ourselves and growing in the hopes that we'll be able to see that growth and measure it, and then use that to say, okay, now I'm gonna focus, I'm gonna center myself again and be aligned. I'm not gonna let this particular situation overwhelm me or take that ownership. We start taking that ownership back slowly. But I mean, that was the honest and straightforward question. I appreciate you asking it because it's not easy, and that's why it always falls back on us, because it's how we approach it and how we view ourselves at that moment and how we start going forward. And so we just got to take that walk sometimes alone. Well, we feel like it's alone, but there's so many different ways for us to kind of navigate, a particular problem or issue, or how to get beyond something.
In that Chris Rock thing, just in thinking about it again, what everyone said, this may go back to love. It's clearly evident that Will loves Jada. At that very moment, I can see that he loves her. But guess what? Jada may not love Will. And just, looking back on it, Will may had to be at the Oscars. He just probably had to show his face. Jada don't strike me as the type that she really wanted to be at the Oscars. But in it just kind of made me think about, at that very moment, he cares for Jada. Yet Jada may not care for him. And love like that sometimes. Sometimes someone will love someone and they ain't going to get their love back. So it's clearly evident to me that at that particular moment, he really cares for Jada. And it just looked like Jada, like, let's hurry up and get this over. I'm tired of being around these phony people. Run me to Roscoe's where I can get some fried chicken and waffles, please. So there's a lot of things that I see in it, but who's to say that what I see is 100% accurate or 2% accurate? So that's just something that came to me, that's all.
What if there was an embarrassment, though, George? I mean, like a feeling of an embarrassment, and just forget the response with a slap sometimes, though. People have been embarrassed out of going to a particular church. You have, I mean, I didn't see it when I was a kid, but I heard stories of deacons pistol whipping people in my old church, and they just don't come back. If it goes back, we talk about that philosophy, that if you're following the wrong philosophy down the line and how it's going to lead to death, it just didn't start. The problem didn't start that day. So we're looking at a display that Will Smith and Chris Rock put on, but could it also be like the lack of identity and awareness leads you down the road to following the wrong philosophy to where you think you're doing something right, and that's what we taught about this, religion, people saying you're following the wrong philosophy, like I said in Psalm, till the end, until it's a death. You think you're doing the right thing because you're so far removed from who you are, and you're denying it. I'm sure that Will Smith, before he went up there and slapped this guy, there had to be 10% of him saying, no, don't do that. But the 90% won out. And so when we start talking about, going back to the beginning, he's got to strip away that 80% that was lost on that side. He's got to dig back down through all those things of pride, of being embarrassed, past frustration. He may have been overwhelmed emotionally at that point. But like he said, he was smiling initially, but then he looked over and saw he connected with the one person he was connected with in there and saw that, like, hey, this bothers him a little bit. What if all those things just kind of balled over at the particular time? But clearly there was a lack of awareness of who he was, and the balance, the instability there allowed an emotional response. Because I know if you start talking about the other five senses, his heart rate probably got elevated. He probably got hot and sweating. And there was something that just caused the rage to go up and do it. Where what we're talking about now, he's talking about integrating all these senses, bringing them under control, being disciplined to where, what, my intuition, my identity of who I am is not, it came in my mind that I should go up there and slap this dude, but my intuition, my gut, my wisdom, all those things are telling me, no, don't handle it that way. And so it was just, I think, the culmination of building up to someone he wasn't. And it's funny that it's an actor. People that have to get into character to play certain roles and how they have to change their mindset and to become something else didn't know who he was at that moment in time. And that response just allowed him to go up there. And you just saw the results of someone who's been following a philosophy that has gotten him off center. And he's now, this result, this issue is going to hopefully force him to go back to beginning and find out who he is and control that part of it. And then we do it all the time, whether it's at work, manager, people want to slap their boss, but why don't you? Because one, you say, well, I hit my manager, I might as well just leave because I'm done. But two, it's just like, it's just not the place or time, and you balance yourself out because your wisdom knows that if I do this, this is going to affect me long term here and other places. So that was sort of like a take that I was just kind of evolving on as you brought it back up, just thinking of, he denied himself the opportunity to be who he was. And Chris Rock denied himself that same opportunity by just in his material that he was presenting that night and not being able to be who he needed to be at that particular time and sensitive and understanding to, the joke that he was. So it was a combination of things, but I think it's just more of a way to look at somebody else's journey. If we look at their journey, all the other things you brought up, you saying from 2016, this is how your philosophy can kind of take you down a path that takes you away from understanding who you are and not meditating on the ability and the things that you bring to the table and they created something last night, and they're going to have to deal with it.
I believe that what happened last night had to happen, and sometimes it takes things like that for us to really, as you say, really pause and go back and start thinking and seeing ourselves for who we really are. When we thought we were someone, I thought I was dealing with everything as I should. I have millions and millions of dollars. I'm well respected, and now I'm looking toward the next portion of my life and what needs to be done. And I believe that there's going to be something very positive that comes out of this, because you could see the remorse afterwards in the part of the acceptance speech. Although he did not apologize to Chris Rock, he apologized for the way he came across to everyone else. But I believe that there's something bigger that's going to come out of this for Will Smith in terms of him really getting in touch with who he really is, and hopefully some meaningful change that's going to impact other people's lives as a result of him getting in touch with who he is and what he has access to that can be beneficial to others.
No, I definitely agree. I think it had to happen last night, and for whatever reason, we witnessed it, and we talked a couple of weeks ago about just like being more aware and just not missing the signs and signals of different things as they happen. And of course, none of us can miss that. I didn't see it last night live. I just, like, when I got up this morning, George was texting, and I just Googled it. So, but it did happen for a reason, and it just kind of like we can apply it to, like you said, all of the stuff that we've been talking about, and how if you just want to look at it from the outside and just kind of, we don't know Will Smith's journey, and that's why it goes back to, like you said, no matter how much money, fame, and wealth, what is he feeling inside? What does he feel like his? So there's something that's burning within him that he will have to reckon with too, before anyone can actually on the outside really help him.
I want to make a comment. I don't know if anybody had mentioned this, but it's been said for years that Will and Jada has an open marriage. I don't know if anybody had mentioned that on the call tonight. And part of that comes into play. And guess what? Maybe a year ago, or maybe a year or two ago, that there was this big talk about Jada having this entanglement when she, in other words, she had an affair with this R&B singer named August Alsina. So, and when all this came out, I mean, Jada was talking about it, and that played a big role in shaping Will's, his mindset, because it was very, it was talked about all on the social media that, about him being embarrassed. And there's one particular look he had on his face was they made a meme out of it. He had this sad look on his face. So that too, I believe, had played a part in all this built up. And because, I mean, everybody knows that, everybody knows who Chris Rock is, and he's been a comedian for years. And my personal opinion about Chris Rock, I don't really recall him ever being derogatory or making a nasty joke towards anybody. And like I think Kathy said this earlier. I think it was Kathy who said she think if it had been maybe a white comedian who made this joke, she don't think that Will Smith probably would have approached the stage, which I don't believe that either. But yeah, I heard a couple people say, yeah, like I heard ST saying, maybe somebody else may have said, maybe it was time for this to come out. It wasn't. I honestly don't believe what Chris Rock said really was the main part of him coming out and doing this. This was all, I believe that it was all of this had building up over the past couple of years. That's what I truly believe. But like I said, because I mean, like I said, I remember the first, because I mean, some people may say, well, he just said he made a joke about her, making the next G.I. Jane 2 movie. Because the first thing out of Chris Rock's mouth, he said, Jada, I love you. And then he said, I look forward to seeing you in the next, the next G.I. Jane movie. Everybody laughed, including Will. And I think if, and I know, I don't know whether, maybe Chris Rock knew about it. My honest opinion, I don't think he really knew about her having alopecia. I don't believe that. But I mean, I could be wrong. And it's like we were saying that I believe Will Smith, he's a very, very intelligent person. And I do believe he has special gifts. But and he did mention in his speech that God has him on a journey. I remember he said something to that nature. He made that comment, and so maybe this is probably something he needs to deal with. And he also said, I remember him saying that Denzel Washington told him, said, what was that? He said something about what was that? He said, the higher you get, the more the devil is going to mess with you, or something to that nature, something to that effect that he said that Denzel said. So I believe, Will is on his journey. So I mean, so it's just some things that he has to deal with. And then, and my thing about people in Hollywood, they love all the praise and everything, but they, you got to take the good with the bad. You got to take the bitter with the sweet. Can't get all the praise about you being a good actor and this, that, and the third, but you can't deal with this other stuff.
Go ahead.
No, the one thing I was going to just say and remind everybody, like we look at them on the stage with everybody up there last night involved with Elohim. They may not be aware of it, but we are all the same. And that's the aspect of it. Like looking at them, they're all Elohim. That's just they were in denial and unaware of it, and so on that level that they're on, we see how that plays out from the worldly standpoint of the money and fame. But we also have responsibility on our level too. Like, things can play out in our lives when we're not aware of who we are, but we just see it magnified last night. But they were all Elohim standing up there, but just unaware.
That's true. That's true.
But it's sad, but I think it's going to be a good learning. I think a lot of good is going to come out of it. And like you said, Will's on this journey, and he doesn't have to prove anything to anybody but himself, really. And that's no different than us. I mean, before I can do a lot of things or say a lot of things, I have to prove it to myself first. Because if I don't deal with it and I prove it to myself first, it's going to constantly be a place of being stuck or unable to elevate because I'm denying myself an opportunity. So that's why, when I first started talking about this, it goes back to how much of this do we internalize and take the discipline to do step by step and the discipline to do it step by step is what kind of helps us propel forward. If we're not operating with that discipline spiritually, then those are things that kind of like we get forced to deal with something a lot longer than we have to. But if we take disciplined steps to kind of, I know what I need to do, but I don't feel like doing it right now. But you have to force yourself to do it because that's what's gonna, propel us forward a little bit. And like I said, I hated it last night. I liked both of them, and my only thing today, I think I just tell everybody, I hope they get together and work it out. Is what should happen at this point now. That they should get together behind and acknowledge who each other really is. Don't look at the Hollywood persona, but look at each other's, as saying we're both connected. Until they do that, situations aren't going to get better. But before they do that, they both have to kind of do what Mary was saying earlier. They're going to be willing to meet each other where they're at and be willing to make it move forward. But it starts with them individually, and then they have to come together and say, hey, look, let's talk about this and move beyond to that next step. And that will help Will and Chris and everybody else involved dig a little deeper and understand, okay, let me get back a little closer to my identity, my roots, what I really stand for. So, but hopefully that'll happen.
But you know what, S, and all of us, if Jada didn't give that look and she would have gave the phony laugh, none of this would have ever happened. And I'm not saying this is Jada's fault. I'm not saying that. I'm more so alluding to the influence of the female. When Jada gave that look, you got to go get him. If she would have just gave that phony Oscar laugh, none of this, you wouldn't have vision Will Smith going up there doing that. Now, what could have taken place behind closed doors, we don't know. Yet it alludes to the influence of Jada. Once she gave that look, because like I say, when you look at it, Will laughs because the body of the group laughs, or it was a stage laugh, meaning they had an audience laughing. And he just laughed just to save face. Yet when he saw the disappointment of the person he loved, his heart started beating. So, like I say, if Jada, when I say if Jada would have given the phone laugh, I'm not saying this is her fault. Didn't say that. None of this would have ever happened. And being that it did happen, I don't think it set black folk back.
Well, George,
I don't.
Instead of just saying the look, what if Will said, I'm Elohim at that moment? It wouldn't have happened. But that's where he forgot who he was at that point in time. Instead of when he got that look, he'd have been looking back as Elohim, and it wouldn't have happened. But that's
he might have to give two looks. Because once he gets in the car with his wife, okay, he operates as into I'm Elohim. He takes the high ground.
Yeah.
Now, when he get in the car with Jada, he really gonna have to operate in Elohim. So he's human. He made a mistake. Chris Rock made a mistake. And hopefully everyone can learn from it. There's some kind of legality thing. Chris Rock probably gonna sue the Oscars.
Nah, he's not. But it goes back to like battling the two natures that we all have, and that's a big example of what we talk about, balancing those two natures and not being able to let one to get you to an emotional response that as you commit an error that you really, really don't want to do. But at that moment in time, you weren't who you were supposed to be. And the result of it was that you made the wrong choice. And it just, we talk about overwhelm, being anxiety, things overwhelming us. That's how everyday life adds up. And life comes for even people who are worth millions. So how do you deal with it? You start with, if Will's response should have been from within. And even and that may have even caused a few people to even look at, the situation different, but it's kind of like Barbara said, being in a restaurant, he could kind of like, his energy was sensed, man. So it's like, okay, that external, that's the ultimate example of external pressure that caused the man to react emotionally. But if he just said, hey, at this moment in time, his answer came from within. I'm Elohim. Yeah, this isn't a good look, doesn't feel good, but it would have been, when we talk about forecasting and not looking at it would have been the best decision. But when you deny it in that moment in time, and like I said, we all go through it, we all get the challenges every day. When you deny it in that moment in time, you open yourself up for errors. Any other comments or questions on it, though? But I mean, I think that just had to happen, and it really just had to happen for us tonight to really look at it, real world example of how things can go wrong. George, when you get in there, don't have that road rage tomorrow when somebody cuts you off. If there's anything else, I didn't realize here we were going there. 7:45. But if not, I appreciate it tonight. I think if nothing else, we really got a good look and discuss, what a really sad situation is. An emotional response can lead to a bad decision when we're unaware or deny who we are at that place and time. I'm hoping next lesson we can kind of combine a lot more of what we've been talking about. This kind of an overview of combining how, what we should do. I even feel like, Mary's question is even having a more in-depth answer about that too. So hopefully we can start really combining everything that we've been talking about so far to just look at this thing as a whole and how it can help us by using it and just make things easier. And when we use it, how we maximize it. That's sort of all I have for tonight. I really appreciate everybody's comments and thoughts, and we'll keep on keeping on. We'll keep removing the layers and going back to the beginning for ourselves and staying aware and disciplined. I thank everybody for tonight. That's really all I have there. Unless somebody else got anything else to add or questions.
Thank you, Ash, for the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Esty. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
Night, everybody.
Bye, everybody.